like the ideas that come to your mind that want to come out and they want to be written down, you second guess them because you haven't been in the momentum of trusting and seeing results. So that first line that comes, you're like, oh, no, that's trash. No, I said some shit like that before. No, that's corny. I don't know. Instead of just being like, yo, it's a first line. Write the shit down and trust that it'll lead you to the second line and to the third. You know what I mean? So like, I had to just start showing up.
Welcome to another episode of the Blank Canvas, a project brought to you by Plinko Solutions focused on accessibility around AI. Today is a really exciting topic. We're going to be covering a few different main bullet points. One being the rise of browser agents and kind of how that applies in the world of intelligence systems, specifically brought to you by relational design and enterprise design, which is, I feel, rather under talked about within the space, and I'm really excited to kind of bring some light to that. I had promised earlier this week to rebuild the landing page live and go through the offer ideation. As I was doing that and tapping into some resources, I realized how much of the enterprise design and resources that I've picked up over the last few years that I could integrate better in towards what I'm doing. So with browser agents specifically, I wanted to speak about that. Browser agents serve a specific purpose that we, for whatever reason, have overlooked over the time we've kind of got to know language models, mostly because it's hard to imagine kind of how these things operate. So just to kind of draw you the difference. We're typically used to language models that operate in a chat window, kind of like a black box effect, and they come back with a response, right? They do all the calculations, they go figure it out. There has been another mode, which is kind of like a research mode that shows you all of its thinking process. It kind of walks you through it and really kind of brings you through that relational thinking, how things kind of impact each other. And what's really cool about the enterprise design side of things is you get to see how these systems really complement each other. In this case, so the difference on a technical level is now instead, it virtualizes, meaning it creates its own special operating system, its own little window to exist and kind of operate in, which allows it now to kind of go click and function and almost simulate a human-like behavior, which is really cool, right? So how does that apply in terms of the actual technical utility side of things? I'm going to show you two set examples. So one, I'll do in lifetime, kind of pulling this prompt chain over from another screen. So this detail, if you're interested in copy pasting it, you can. I think it's more important for you to really understand the intent and why I'm doing this versus the actual prompt, because the prompt itself is just a demo. Let me show you. So let me just make something clear. And this is kind of, off the book, straight notepad, that an enterprise is a unit of business organization. So the systems that I'm showing you here, while they encapsulate a lot of different dimensions and domains, our aim is to become whole with it. So holistic collaboration, this kind of a way of design, transcends silos, and it combines perspectives to allow us to better understand how it works together. So before I get into like how it applies design, this here is a fresh GPT chat. Let me show you. So the magic here is I feed it a system prompt, right? And it remembers that, right? This is basically asking it to be an enterprise design coach who takes business pay points, turns it into board-ready artifacts. So it structures it into tables, mermaid code, which I'll dive into, and kind of gives us an angle to play with. So the input that I'm feeding it here, this can be changed, but I'm looking for small B2B service firms who want to adopt AI but face fragmented data. So, they're scattered pretty much. And all I'm asking of that is to create 3 base elements, which is rooted in this enterprise design piece: identity, architecture, and experience. So take you right to it. That the individual is co-creating the enterprise. We're looking at who benefits, right? Who is necessary for the outcome, and who is accountable. In this case, that rests solely on my shoulders, being a one-man team on this. But of course, in terms of resources that I might need to figure out how to build something, I need to kind of have that in mind. How does that relate to browser agents? I will get to that, I promise. For that identity piece, understanding purpose and stories, content, right? that all basically combines this sense of identity that you get by orienting yourself and learning from the people around you. So getting real feedback, talking to people that your problem is solving or could potentially solve, right? Just conversations. It's better to say more than less when it comes to figuring out this kind of identity piece. I will say, this is philosophical, but identity formed in community can sometimes be intoxicating, because if you really want to kind of get to understand your source for how you rationalize things, the space in order to figure that out is important. So the next piece of that is the experience. So the shared task, the actual importance of those shared tasks, the people that are being served within that, right? So that's more so down here. So what people actually want to achieve and get done. What are the kind of activities that they have to experience in order to get that kind of finalized? The channels in which people kind of communicate and go back and forth. So if you're following this from my most recent piece about solution architecture, you'll get to kind of see, whenever I talk about architecture, all architecture is, when I really kind of get to the root of it, is this kind of piece. It's what are we able to do by orchestrating people and assets, right? What do we have access to? What are our capabilities? The next piece is process. What do we need to do in order to perform those capabilities, right? Often businesses thrive on process over systems, very much at the beginning. You don't want to over engineer, essentially. So by providing that, you're able to then see how an asset can generate more time and actually create what's needed for the business, right? So when you take that into account, you have this good balance of outcome, object, and activity, right? This is a relational kind of piece. So when you orient your construction around, how you approach browser agents specifically, you can then start to see how these things intersect. The word intersect scares some people. It's basically, how do these things connect? The core kind of pieces kind of focus. If you think about the theory of constraints, as an individual, we can only focus and fix so much. Organization, product, and brand. So what does it mean with these intersections, how things connect? We're talking about organization, which is people working together to better something. Talking about product, which is what we make, offer, and deliver for the benefit and service of others, right? So the big point between identity and who we're serving. And then brand, which is our name and what it stands for. Each of these things are rooted in those components I had mentioned, right? In order to construct organization, you need purpose, story, and content, right? In order to construct product and architecture, you need capability, process, and assets, right? My apologies, slapping the mic again. In order to construct experience, you need to have task, journey, and channel. Again, just reiterating that, just to kind of draw in how we're constructing this, is in order to approach browser agents in a meaningful way, we have to essentially draw from this giant relational tree, which I'll show you here. I was going to look insane to begin with, but bear with me. I promise I'll make it digestible. I think it was right here at the very root. There we go. So this one right here is everything I'm talking about. So dare I say, this little graph here changed pretty much everything for me. Let me bring this to your screen. So let's take this in. Reiterate one more time. Whenever you're constructing a productized service, which is what AI and automation is in a nutshell, is a packaged way of solving something, right? I'm not giving you a software as a subscription. I'm not giving you another platform to add onto your monthly subscriptions. I'm implementing a experience, right? A full-on enterprise organization behind solving this problem for you. In order to do that, I myself, in my offer, need to compose all of these pieces. So I need to showcase purpose, right? I'm trying to free up time. That's the baseline. I'm using AI to shortcut a lot of the cost and shortcut a lot of the time sink in order that people deal with, right? Like their day-to-day 12-hour hustles, grinds, I would say, incorporate a lot of that. How am I doing that? Through content. Now, in order to provide content, I have to whip out crazy things like this. I didn't even block the camera with that. In order to do that, I need to, have my kind of whiteboards and ideas and material ways of explaining things. Why? Partially out of obsession, partially out of identity. It's just who I am. I love to kind of, make sense of the world and how I'm working with it. And then, of course, my story behind that is embedded. As you're experiencing this and me talking, there's parts of my story and also things I've done in the past leading me to this point, which allow me to kind of, one, speak to a bit of authority in it, but two, articulate it in a way that is meeting you where you're at and not speaking just at the theory level, which, is something that I'd love to play against. Practicality is the biggest piece. That feeds into my brand, right? Now, before I dive into how that all kind of connects there, the experience you get by working potentially, either with myself or anyone within the AI space is there are certain tasks that they have to prepare, which they provide, right? Myself included. There's a certain fulfillment process that goes with things that is done through these channels and relationships and, like these common greed settings, kind of communication funnels. And doing that, you're able to clearly see where you're beginning, what's the before and after, where are you going, and envision that far out. There are plentiful, even outside of this industry, plenty of enterprises and companies that their journey is purely just to get you in the door and to propagate this in-shitification, just kind of keep giving you something that'll make you feel like this is helping you, but truthfully it's creating more problems than it's going to solve. And it requires foresight and kind of understanding of the journey, going to the same place essentially, right? This fosters back into product, which is built upon the back end of architecture. So when I say back end, all right, people are kind of like, what does that entail? What kind of bodies are actually, what is this living in? It's living in the processes. With my background in sales management and technical recruitment and business development in general, being able to understand how businesses kind of stack their systems on top of each other, as well as their processes and their protocols and routines, and how those things kind of foster their growth of assets. How can they create something that will continue to help them grow meaningfully, materially? And what's their capability to even contemplate or even go that direction or even understand what it requires to create what they're trying to create? In order to meaningfully articulate all of that and not be overwhelmed by its components, there's 3 specific elements to pay attention to. Understanding how these 3 elements play in each other: organization, brand, and product. People working together to figure out how can we make something and offer something and deliver it for the benefit and service of others, and how to make that our name and stand for it as part of our identity, or who we are. You hit all 3 of these points and you essentially have something that is relationally going to work the market. I will say this much, and forgive me for the lighting, as the sun is setting and my light is not working. When it comes to being able to articulate an offer and presentation, to take all these things into account, it requires somebody to sit down and take the time to cross-reference all these different pieces. So the remainder of this video is me articulating examples and kind of, what other people are doing in that essence. What I'm going to do going forward is a bit more competitive to that. And I'm really excited to kind of lay that out and showcase that in a more meaningful way. If you're still tuned into this and kind of really enjoying, what this kind of perspective warp is, it's not just browser agents, if you kind of caught on to that. It's automation solutions. It's AI that will return time where it matters most in a way that hasn't been done before. And opening the collaboration, the floor for that, opens your mind to seeing, okay, what are all the utilitarian systems at play, whether or not you yourself are managing any fraction of it. Any sort of organization of people will have these different components in play at all times, and it'll constantly kind of be warping over each other. And that's kind of the game behind it. It's figuring out to see the moving pieces and to skate where the puck is. That's the aim. The caveat is a lot of AI and automation people, like they go in, they grab this, these crazy tools and these crazy, like they only have fractions of this, I would say. And then when it gets to actually growing the business through its longevity, a lot of it gets lost in its design. So being able to root that and being able to then look towards what kind of offer ideation can we create with browser agents. Well, up until this point, you're like, I still haven't seen a browser agent demo. I'm trying to make sense of it. Let me show you that. So I know I was doing a bit on the side here and I was kind of jumping ahead, but I want to do it again just to kind of walk you through it. So got O3 on, no project selected. Gonna go ahead and fit this one. And then, praying this works well, you're gonna see the difference. So I am gonna ask, I realize I have to start the conversation with that. My apologies. So I'm gonna go and say, hey, agent mode. You only have to select a few of these if you're not on the enterprise plan, which is ironic because we're talking about enterprise. But as a smaller business, applying these principles allow you to essentially elevate and grow what you're trying to do. So, boom. You understand the vision. I'll go ahead, feed it this. Now, all I'm asking for here is to reflect that identity, architecture, and experience piece. So it's taking into account the kind of full layout and the full structure that I'm really looking for. Again, these prompts, if you're interested, you can add them in, message, shoot a comment, message. Not used to YouTube yet. The YouTube. It's less important what the prompt is saying and more to understand how this kind of exists. So what's happening right now, instead of manually searching, it's going ahead and it's actually walking you through that experience through a headless browser. I mean, that's why it's not entirely headless because you can see what it's doing. To be frank with you, this is probably just an animation they prefixed. Most browser agents don't even show you this. But you can understand what's happening here is something different, right? So I'm going to do my best to kind of articulate this with a pen and pencil. AI up until this point, right, is simple, kind of like there's a question, goes in this weird black box, and then out comes a result. Could have done this with shapes. What browser agents enable is this kind of process to happen up until the point where it actually makes sense to then pass forward. So this is no longer a thing, right? It's now how can we create reinforcement layers so that it can think and solve these frameworks in a very meaningful and tangible way. Let me just make something clear though. While this is novel because it's inherently baked into the architecture, which is the way it works already, with automations and existing AI practices, you can still do this. It's just a matter of prompt chaining and setting up in a way where it builds on each other. Chances are you've already done this. But by doing it with a browser agent, they say it's more powerful in the sense where it will do it already within its own thing. And the more volume of reinforcement that you can get with artificial intelligence within the same time span, the higher quality result. Now, prefix that. That does require you to be deterministic, to actually have a set of instructions and steps where you kind of know all the steps of the way. You can make it exploratory. That will use up more of the prompt, and I highly recommend figuring that out with another language model, which is what I did here, just because the amount of prompts you have are limited. And that's just how it is now. But this is kind of how you can take it. And any sort of factor or component that I had articulated, you can explore that further, even just as an intelligence system. So that's why it's much more important to pay attention to the actual frameworks that I'm talking about over the actual prompts. So that's why enterprise design is one of those ways that if you don't have these frameworks and you don't have these kind of anchors, when you approach these new tools, it's more than just creating an AI agent. It's creating an intelligence system that can actually support you on your way to figure out, how to make money and problem solve, I think is the biggest piece. Like without these intelligence systems, problem solving is just, it's not as straightforward as you may think. So what's happening here now is like, okay, give me a result. Now what I have already prepared is a prompt chain. So a prompt chain is just a series of prompts that I know because I have a limited amount I've researched prior that I'm able to squeeze the most out of this. Again, like some of these I can do without the browser agent, but part of having this reinforcement layer is it now sees its own self as its own entity, and it's able to kind of you know rationalize there, which sounds quite crazy and for some daunting. But in our case, when we have GPT say, okay, write this better, prove this tonality, it's taking it in the context of the dimensions of the thread, if that makes sense, right? When you assign it an identity and a system kind of reinforcement prompt and an experience and a product lens to it, it then has arms and legs to actually move towards where it needs to go in a more like tangible way. So with that being said, you'll see from here, this gives it a bit more of a deterministic structure, right? You have context that's progressive, and it doesn't require you to have ongoing infrastructure to kind of support that. Like you can have a GPT project or something like that going, but even here, like the copy, if I'm being truthful, is still very AI and GPT sounding. But that's the nature of it, right? Like that's why I say the prompts aren't so important. This is just an enterprise design coach. It's an agent that's able to build those reinforcement layers. So if you yourself are exploring this, and you're trying to see how to use agents, specifically browser agents, to improve, I'd like to point you to a few resources. So first and foremost is Airtop, right? So any sort of scraping that you've done before with Appify or anything like that, or even Manus.in, $5,000 free credit. Got an affiliate as well in the description. But $350 million funded company built on the backbone of basically integrating a human in the loop and training it to go through a website. Again, feel free to use ChatGPT agent mode. You just have a limited amount. This way you get to actually play with it, make it work. There's a few other tools as well that are coming onto the market, which I'm excited to showcase and kind of really emphasize how when you apply all these different facets and different kind of pieces, you can really see something that you can truly build. So just to reiterate, our aim at the end of the day is to become more holistic and to build more of that collaborative way of design. Without that, we are very much in the muddiness of this in between, right? This is what the facets kind of really look like in real life, is they constantly overlap, they constantly grow over each other. It's very rarely clear cut like this. However, you can bet that the components of this are very much in every whole. So that being said, see you guys in the next one.